Hey everyone. Hey, I just wanted to share a little story and do a video of this old barn on the side of the Nasco Road. So we're just west of Quesnel on the Nasco Road. Quesnel's in the central interior of British Columbia, and we're about 8 miles west. All right, here we go. Hey, I just want to mention that I filmed this video on private property. I did have permission to enter the property and film the video. Please don't trespass on this property or any other property that you know is private. Thank you. So this barn is on the side of the Nasco Road, and just over behind me is my grandfather's place. And he bought that in 1925, and this place was adjacent, 640 acres, and it was built sometime mid-1930s. Over very near the present road is where the house once stood. And it was a green lumber frame structure, fairly small house. You can still see some of the green on the siding. Well, the building that's always stood out, though, very noticeable, a little more in the open from the highway, you can see it easier, is this old hay shed. And it certainly has stood well over the years. So the story I know is that a Mr. Peterson lived here. Anton Peterson. He was here with his partner in farming, Mr. Bill Walsh. Now in 1938, Mr. Peterson was diagnosed with cancer. And he spent a considerable amount of time in the hospital in Quesnel. And as the paper put it, he was an inmate of the hospital. On April 12th, 1938, my grandfather went down to the hospital at Mr. Peterson's request, and he brought Mr. Peterson home. Now, Mr. Peterson knew that his cancer was terminal. So he decided to end his life in this small house right here in the early morning hours of April 13th. My grandfather heard the gunshot and came over, and he and Mr. Walsh then drove into Bushy Lake and contacted the authorities. Mr. Peterson is buried in the Quesnel Pioneer Cemetery. I wanted to include this visit to the Quesnel Pioneer Cemetery and finish off the video with a look at Mr. Peterson's final resting place. Interestingly enough, the headstone has his birth date and date of death, and the date of death is wrong, at least according to the newspaper articles. The newspaper article that was published on April 19th said that he had passed away the previous Wednesday, which would have been April 13th of 1938. I guess that just goes to show you that even things that are written in stone aren't necessarily correct. So there's a little bit more left to the story. Anton Peterson did not have any relatives in Quesnel at the time, so Walt Mers came forward to arrange for Anton's burial in the Quesnel Cemetery. Walt had Anton buried near to two graves that he'd previously arranged for a year earlier, the graves of his wife Minnie and his son Bob. Walt would go on to farm across the road for another 30 years before passing away in late 1966. Bill Walsh would return to his own farm, a 40-acre parcel he had preempted in 1926, just a mile west of here along the Nasco Road. The Nasco Road would be rerouted a few years later as well, and the Bill Walsh place today is found along a side road called Mers Road. And this place, often referred to as a Fraser place, would be periodically rented out to various families for the next 20 years before being allowed to fall into disrepair and beginning to succumb to nature. John A. Fraser had originally purchased the property in 1921, and eventually his family would sell it in the late 1960s. John A. Fraser was a local Quesnel businessman and also a Canadian Member of Parliament. His son, Alex Fraser, a young man at this time, would go on to become a British Columbia member of the Legislative Assembly. Well, that's all I've got for this one, guys. I hope when you see an old building in your travels, this video makes you think of the stories that that building could tell. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me in the next one.